Hey, what is up guys? Welcome back to another Minecraft Java video. Today we're going to be taking a look at a comparison between Iris and Sodium versus OptiFine, and by looking at OptiFine versus Iris and Sodium we can see which of the two mod loaders are going to give us the most efficient and better FPS. I'm also going to have a look at the vanilla game and see what kind of base FPS I am getting inside my vanilla game. I'm going to do a comparison between OptiFine, and I'm also going to do a comparison between Iris shaders and Sodium. I'm also going to apply shaders to both OptiFine and Iris shaders and see what kind of FPS I can get in OptiFine versus Iris and Sodium. I'm also going to optimize the settings and options for OptiFine. I'm also going to optimize the settings for Iris and Sodium as well, and I'm going to have a look at the FPS I can get, and this is going to be the most possible FPS I can get in OptiFine compared to Iris shaders and Sodium. So first of all, let's go ahead and take a look at the FPS I am getting in my base vanilla game with no mods or anything installed. And first of all, what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to delete my options.txt file to make sure that I am running the default settings. So I'm going to be comparing all of these three different scenarios on the default settings, and then I'm going to make changes and do the comparisons after that. So let me close down this window. I'm now going to hover over any one of these lines, click on this folder icon over here to open up my Minecraft directory. I'm going to look for where it says options.txt. I'm also going to delete this file that is optionsof.txt because I do know that that is to do with OptiFine. So let's go ahead and delete this as well. I'm also going to go into my config folder just to see if there's anything in there. So if you guys are looking to completely reset the mods or reset your settings, you can do this method. So just look at the config folder and then delete all of the options txt files to make sure that it can revert back to the default settings. So let's close this down. Now let me go back into my default vanilla game. This is the latest release on Minecraft version 1.18. So as you guys can see on the top left here, it does say Minecraft 1.18. At the bottom here in the game, it also says Minecraft version 1.18. Now let me just quickly go to my options. I can see that my FOV has been turned to normal, so that is the default setting. If I click on video settings, we can see that these are the default settings that I would get in my game. The first thing I'm going to do is actually make my max frame rate to unlimited and turn off VSync, so I can actually see what kind of maximum FPS I can get. I am also using fraps, so we can have a look at what kind of FPS I can get inside my game. So let me click on done, and let me go into the single player. I have created a world and I have created a scenario where I'm just going to be staring at some scenery to have a look at what kind of FPS I am getting. Now this test and the other tests I'm going to do today, they may not be perfect because OptiFine and Iris shaders are in fact in alpha and beta stages. However, they should give us some good kind of indication of what kind of FPS we can expect with the two mods. Alright, so let me just get rid of this message here. Now, as you guys can see, I am getting close to 550 FPS there. I am just staring there, not moving at all, and it is actually fixed to 620 FPS. So let's say between 550 to 620. So I'm going to say this is on average 600 FPS on the base game. Now obviously I can go ahead and tweak these settings in my video settings to try and get even more FPS, but for now let's just assume this is the baseline FPS in my vanilla game. So let me exit out of this now and let me quit this game. I'm now going to launch OptiFine, and I'm going to have a look at what kind of FPS I can get with OptiFine installed. For those of you who are wondering where do I get OptiFine or Iris shaders and Sodium from, to get OptiFine, all you need to do is just go to optifine.net and download the latest preview version for version 1.18. Same thing for Iris shaders, just go to Iris shaders, all one word, .net, and then click on the download now button and download the universal installer. Alright, so as you guys can see, this is the game with OptiFine loaded. It does say Minecraft version 1.18 and modded in brackets, and if I click on options, go to video settings, we can see at the bottom here I am using OptiFine version HD H335 Ultra. So this is the latest version as of today's date for OptiFine that I can actually get. As you guys can see, it's already put my settings on the default. I haven't actually changed anything, and the max frame rate is set to unlimited, which is good. So I can click on done, and I can actually go into the single player, go into the same world, and let's take a look at what kind of FPS I get on the default settings for OptiFine. Alright, so as you guys can see, I am now getting close to 800 FPS. So that is the default FPS I am getting in OptiFine on the default settings. So let's make a note of that. So I am getting about 800 to 850 FPS. Now these are the default settings. I haven't changed anything. This is just installing OptiFine and launching the game with OptiFine installed for the very first time. Okay, so now let me go ahead and enable some shaders. I'm just going to go into my video settings, click on shaders. I'm actually going to use Sildurs Vibrant shaders. I do think they are a good shader pack to test out, and this is the latest version of Sildurs Vibrant shaders. This is version 1.31 extreme version that came out quite recently. Let's click on done again, and let's go back inside our game. Now as you guys can see, the FPS at the moment, I am getting 200 FPS there. Let me actually change the time of day to make it daytime. There we go. So now you can see that I am getting 220 FPS there. It is fixed, and now I'm going to go ahead and disable the shaders again. And what I'm going to do now, I'm going to actually optimize OptiFine and try and reduce my settings so I can actually see what kind of maximum FPS I can get with the optimized settings. So let me just quickly do that, and I'll be right back. Alright, so I've finished optimizing OptiFine. So as you guys can see, I've actually turned down quite a few things. I've set the graphics to fast, changed my render distance to 6, turned down the simulation distance to the lowest 5 chunks. And if I go into my detail section, I've tried to make everything set to either off or the lower setting. Let me just quickly change the sun and moon to off as well, and I'll try to change everything to the fast setting or turn it off if it allows me. I have actually left fog to fancy and the fog start at 0.8 because I have found that they actually don't reduce my FPS. They actually give me surprisingly an increased FPS if I set my fog to fancy. So I've left that as fancy for the fog. Everything else is completely off, and if I go to quality, you guys can see I've turned everything else completely off in this section, and in the animations I've turned all of the animations off, and in the performance section I've turned on fast render and fast math, and I've left everything else turned off as well. So let's go back inside our game. I'm also going to reduce my FOV to 60 to try and get even more FPS to try and push for those extra frames. Now, as you guys can see, I am getting 1,450 FPS there. What I'm going to do now, I'm going to press F11 on my keyboard and try and get even more FPS by making my game run in full screen mode. So let me go ahead and do that now. Alright, so as you guys can see, the maximum FPS that I can get in my game is 1600. So 1600 FPS is what I can get. So it is actually touching 1650 FPS, as you guys can see in the top right corner there, which is what Fraps is showing me. Another thing to note is that never use the F3 console to show your FPS, because as you guys can see on the top left there, it is now dropped to 950 FPS. And the reason for that is because it has to load all of this extra information, which slows down our FPS. So never use F3 to measure your FPS. Always use an external program like Fraps or MSI Afterburner. So let's get rid of that. So as you guys can see, I am getting a constant 1650 FPS with the most optimized settings in OptiFine that I can actually push the system to do. Alright, let me go ahead and enable the shaders as well for the optimized settings on OptiFine, and let's see what kind of FPS I could get with the optimized settings and options there. Alright, so on the optimized setting, I am getting 235 FPS with Sildurs Vibrant shaders. Now these are the optimized settings in OptiFine, and this is what Sildurs shaders is currently looking like with the optimized settings. So that is quite interesting to see what kind of FPS we are getting with Sildurs Vibrant shaders. So what I'm going to do now, guys, I'm going to go back and exit out of this game. I'm now going to delete my options.txt file, which the game has created, so then we can get rid of all of the other options there. So now we can actually load up the game with Iris shaders and Sodium. Now, one thing to note is that Iris shaders comes already bundled with Sodium. So all of the settings which I am going to be changing are essentially Sodium. So you could say this is OptiFine versus Sodium. The reason I am calling it OptiFine versus Iris is because we are also testing shaders as well. So let's go ahead and hover over where it says Iris and Sodium. And as you guys can see, this is the latest version. This is Iris and Sodium, and it is using the fabric loader, which is 0.12.5. So let's click on play and wait for the game to now load up. It should launch the game in windowed mode using my default settings. Alright, so as you guys can see, the game has now loaded up. Let me just maximize this window. At the bottom left here, it does say Minecraft 1.18 fabric. If I click on options, and if I go to the video settings, we can see now this is the Sodium version of the video settings, completely different to how OptiFine or the default game looks like. So using the default settings, let's go back inside our single player game there, and let's see what kind of FPS we can get straight out of the box by just using the default settings and not changing anything. Let's go inside our game. Okay, let me just quickly disable the VSync and make the max frame rate to unlimited. Now, one thing to note is that if you put this on the maximum setting there, it will say 260. So just note that this is actually unlimited. So let me click on apply and done and go back inside my game. And interestingly, as you guys can see, I am getting higher FPS than what I was getting with OptiFine. So the default settings with Iris and Sodium are actually much higher than what I was getting in OptiFine. So as you guys can see right now, I am getting 1350 FPS on average there. As you guys can see on the top right hand corner of my screen, that's even touching 1400 FPS, which is really cool. This is just the default settings. So just imagine what we can do, what FPS we can gain by doing a few tweaks. Okay, so similar to how I did with OptiFine, let me go into my options, click on video settings, click on shader packs, and I'm also gonna enable the Sildurs vibrant shaders version 1.31 Extreme Edition. Let me click on apply and let me click on done. Let's have a look at what kind of FPS we can get in our game using the default settings for Sildurs vibrant shaders. Okay, so I am getting 238 FPS, as you guys can see in the top right hand corner of my screen there. It is actually fixed on 238, 239 FPS there, maxing out at 240 FPS. So that is really cool. This is the default setting for Iris and Sodium, and this is what FPS I am getting with Sildurs vibrant shaders. Let me go ahead and disable the shaders as well. Alright, so what I'm going to do now, I'm going to tweak the settings. I'm going to optimize the settings for Sodium and try and get even more FPS. So let me do that now. Alright, so I've turned most of these settings down. So in the general section, I've turned the render distance to 6, simulation to 5 chunks, and I put the max shadow distance to 2 because that does actually have a high performance impact, as you guys can see from the tooltip there. If I go to quality, I've changed everything to fast, or try to change stuff to off as well. I've left entity shadows and vignettes ticked because the performance impact is actually quite low. And in the performance section, I haven't actually touched that. I've left everything as it is, and same for the advanced section as well. And obviously we are not using any shaders either. So let me apply that and let me go back inside my game and just have a look at what kind of FPS I can get with the tweaked settings. And as you guys can see, I am getting 1780 FPS, which is really cool, and it's a really good FPS to get with Iris and Sodium in Minecraft Java Edition version 1.18, and these are with the tweaked settings that I've just done. Let me go ahead and change a few more settings. Let me make the FOV to 60, and I'm also going to change the game to full screen mode and have a look at what kind of FPS I can get in full screen mode. So let me do that now. Alright, so as you guys can see, I am now getting 1850 FPS, which is the highest FPS that I have been able to achieve today in my game. This is a really nice change, and it is something that I was expecting to get the more FPS with Iris and Sodium compared to OptiFine. So on my system, surprisingly, I do get better FPS with Sodium compared to what I would get with OptiFine. So if you guys noticed that with OptiFine, I was getting close to 1600 FPS, but with Sodium, I am able to get up to 1860 FPS. Let me also go ahead and enable the shaders on these optimized settings and have a look at what kind of FPS I can get inside my game. So as you guys can see, I'm getting 282 FPS there in my game. So hopefully you guys have found this video useful and you are able to see the comparison of OptiFine versus Sodium, OptiFine versus Iris shaders, and you can make up your mind on which one is better for you. Do leave a comment below and let me know what works better for you. What kind of FPS are you guys getting in your base game? What kind of FPS are you guys getting in your OptiFine loaded game? And what kind of FPS you are getting in your Iris loaded game? And let me know what one works better for you. Do you get more FPS with Sodium or do you get more FPS with OptiFine? If you guys have found this video useful, please do give us a like, and also please do subscribe to this channel to help support, to help it grow, and I'll see you guys next time. Thank you for watching.